All right, good afternoon. Let's get this meeting underway. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Director Kelly to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director. We'll begin with the Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for Cablecast on Metro Cable 14, replay on Sunday, September 17, 2017 at 9 a.m., and Monday, September 18, 2017 at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. Webcast is at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district's website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. At this time, we have a public opportunity to discuss matters on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers?
We do have one speaker this evening, Mr. Roger Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell, feel free to come up. Welcome.
Board Chairman Woods, directors, Chief Harms, staff, and members of Metro Fire. My name is Roger Mitchell, longtime resident of this district, and I'm here this evening to thank four directors in particular, and I will tell you why. Director Kelly, Director Gould, Director Clark, and Director Woods. Those four were very instrumental at the last meeting in talking to me and asked me to be here this evening to advertise the fundraising dinner for the restoration of Rio Linda's second ever fire engine, number 2. It will be October the 14th, 5 p.m. at the Rio Linda Alberta Recreation and Park District main office. Some of you have been there before. I have tickets with me tonight. Some of you directors have already purchased them. But more importantly, I would like to tell you tonight who our guest speaker is going to be. Now, before I tell you who that is, I will tell you that the Secret Service has been in contact with us to let us know that their boss will not be in attendance. We had hoped he would be, but as you all know by watching TV, he's been very busy in Texas and in Florida. So a little more about our guest speaker. Basically a nationally known speaking person from out of state. Thank goodness we didn't have to pay for his plane ticket to come to our dinner. But a well-known speaker, very well-versed in the restoration projects, very well-versed in the fire department's world. So we're lucky to have him. So with that, I would tell you that our guest speaker this year will be the Chief of Metro Fire, the Honorable Mr. Ted Harms. So what I hope that does is generates some sales of tickets, because I'm sure that Chief Harms would love to see a large number of his staff there in support. And Chief Casantini does have some tickets. Hopefully he will sell most of those and call me for more. So we would certainly love to see a great contingent of the board there and the staff and members of Metro Fire. But a little about the restoration. It was Rio Linda's second ever fire engine, 1927 American LaFrance. Some of you directors have been there for a dinner and have seen the work. We would share this with you this evening. Before me, original radiator cap that came in the truck, certainly not a radiator cap, but that's what was there, and when they ruined the one before it, it's probably all they could afford. To my right, a computer-generated, period-correct radiator cap, replication of a motor meter, which is your temperature gauge today. That's what they were back then. But a little bit about the detail. Actually, the American LaFrance insignia in front, that's a $25 little postage stamp. So it gives you an idea of the detail we're going to and the cost of things. The wings that you see there are not original to the fire engine, but they were a piece of equipment that you could go to a local parts store, whether you were a car owner or anything, and buy that to put on your car to make a little statement. So what we have done is, I'm a proud member of the Northern California Regional Group of the Horseless Carriage Club of America, and one of our members, these are an original set of wings. They're brass. They're the larger set, which were put on trucks. They do make reproductions. We're proud to tell you that those are not reproductions. Then they were fixed and plated. And you might say, well, gee, if you're restoring the vehicle, why would you put something on that vehicle that's not original? When she was in service, we like to say she wore her working clothes. And we would tell you at the end of the restoration, we would like to tell you that she now has her prom dress. So that there would be 1 or 2 or 3 small nuances like that on the truck that certainly weren't original, but that which you could buy at the time and put on your vehicle. So with that, I would also tell you the work goes on in the engine room that this district is a proud owner of. That engine room was built in 1945 with War Powers Act money. It's the oldest engine room this district has, and it's historically significant because of the funding that was used to build it. So we invite you over to see the work going there. And what we like to say simply is this, that the engine room will be the jewel box, and it'll be housed by jewels. And this district is a very proud owner of Rio Linda's first fire engine, affectionately known as Old Betsy. And we are very proud to be as one of the smallest districts that make up this district, but we will have the first and second ever vehicles from that district, which will be a great benefit to Metro Fire. And that's the way we like to look at this. This isn't about Rio Linda, because that's where the station is, or about the truck itself. It's about preserving the history of Metro Fire that can be used to the benefit of Metro Fire as a whole. So last but not least, this is one of the axe holders that fits on the side of the truck, completely restored. The artwork that you see on this is an exact replica of what was on the truck, because we were lucky that the truck was stored inside, and by the truck being stored inside, most of the artwork was still available. And so we've documented it, measured it, photographed it, and every bit of artwork that goes back on the truck will be the same artwork that was put on at the American LaFrance factory in 1927. The menu for the dinner will be a complete barbecue dinner, and I'm proud to tell you that one of your own is the main cook. He's one of your proud mechanics at Metro Fire, Mr. Scott Courtney, who does a lot of barbecuing and smoking of meats, and last year he was there. He's also a member of our restoration crew. You'd be surprised when you don't have the right tool. There's always a place for a guy that'll loan you the tool, or if you don't know how to do something, he's there with some of his friends to help. So Metro Fire is very actively involved in the restoration of this truck, but not only those of us that are retired from here, but those of you are acting members. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have about the restoration and or the dinner.
Will the Mayor, Bob Bastian, be there?
Mr. Bob Bastian will be there. He's purchased 4 tickets. I don't know, sir, if he's the mayor, but he will be there. He said with bells on, if I might add.
Maybe Dale Faust might be there.
I don't know about Mr. Faust, sir.
Do we have any other comments or questions for Mr. Mitchell?
No, sir, thank you.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes,
I wanted
sir.
to tell you thank you, and let the board of directors know that I have my tickets, and I will be in there while you grace our presence. So make sure that you guys have the opportunity to get your tickets.
I would share with the board, and I thank Mr. Kelly for that very much. I would share with the board a conversation I had with the chief at the last meeting when he purchased 2 tickets. And I know this was in jest. He says, I'm the speaker. I got to buy tickets? And I said, Chief, I said, just to let you know that everybody that's working on this truck and that's working hard for this dinner, we're all buying our own tickets. And I would share with you this, and I think this is important because it goes to, I think, what this project has meant to many people. Yesterday, I received an envelope from the previous fire chief, Mr. Mark Wells, who's a dear friend of mine, and I opened it up, and there was a sizable contribution in there. saying I won't be able to attend, but please, I like the project and I would like to support that. So it's always nice to know that you have these type of friends that you make throughout your fire district career that are helping do this. So again, the invitation is always open to you as a board to come by, see what we're doing. We will have a couple of special events in the next 6 months that we will be inviting you to. So with that, again, if there's no further questions, I thank you for the time this
I
evening.
have Mr. Mitchell, I know that even if you can't make it and you buy a ticket, there's a raffle. Can you?
Yes, sir. Not only a raffle, but we call it a door prize. So there is a stub on each ticket. You fill that out, get it to me if you buy these tickets, and that'll be placed in a drawing. I would be remiss in telling you I know exactly what that prize is going to be. We think it'll be a large screen TV. That's what it was last year. So you don't have to be there to win. So that's an incentive to buy a ticket, I guess, if you can't be there. So.
Yeah, I got my ticket, but I have a conflict, so.
I understand that, Director, and we thank you for that very much. So, any further questions?
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Mitchell? Mr. Mitchell, I've been out there several times. Amazing work you guys are doing. It's looking forward to seeing the progress next month when we get out again.
Well, I
thank you.
appreciate that, Director. And again, the last statement I would like to make, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I grew up out there, but it's not Rio Linda's fire department anymore. And this project, I think this board needs to know, the people that are doing the work on the engine and in the engine room need to know we do this for the betterment of Metro Fire. There's the engine room, it happens to be in Rio Linda, and it just happens to be an old Rio Linda truck, but it will be for the betterment of Metro Fire, and we feel that way very strongly. So thank you for the time this evening, appreciate it very much.
Thank you again. We'll move on. Before we get to the consent item, Ms. Pena, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Director Wood. Under the operations report in our previous board minutes, there was an error. Approximately 35,000 dispatches should have been 3,500. So that change has been made.
So with that change in our minutes, can I get a motion on the consent calendar, please?
So moved.
I've got a motion, a second?
Second.
Got a motion, a second? Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale,
Yes.
Barnes,
Aye.
Jones, Sheets,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Moving on to presentation items. Chief Harms, you have the first one.
Thank you very much. I hope to see all you at the event coming up. I think the Captain Mitchell settled on me as the third ranked one to be there and talk, but that's okay. Tonight, one of the things that is one of the honors I think as a fire chief is that when we look not only internal and give out awards, but as we go external and give out awards to citizens that went above and beyond during some type of event. And tonight we have Daniel Harvey. If Daniel can come on up. Just right over there, or there's right. I just have a thing to read, and I'll be right there with you. On July 23rd, 2017, firefighters on Metro Fire Engine 26B and Medic 25 responded to a call for an unresponsive child that had been removed from a swimming pool at an apartment complex in Antelope. When crews arrived, the child was awake and alert, and after being assessed, was transported to the hospital by Medic 25. While on scene, Captain Jason Vestal spoke with a bystander, Mr. Daniel Harvey, who stated that he had performed CPR for approximately 2 minutes prior to the crew's arrival. Captain Vestal believes that Mr. Harvey's actions contributed to the survival of this child. This is a great example of the importance of CPR as a life-saving skill and the impact CPR has on the chances of survival if started immediately. It takes 2 simple steps. 1, call 911, and 2, push hard and fast on the center of the chest. It can save someone's life. It's with great honor that Metro Fire presents to Mr. Daniel Harvey a certification for life-saving commendation. This commendation is for your extraordinary efforts to protect and preserve human life on July 23rd, 2017. Congratulations. Thank you.
Can I ask the gentleman where he learned CPR?
Faint memory from health class in freshman year.
Great.
Great.
Well done, thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. Captain Vestal, thank you so much for bringing this up.
In all respect, my brother, it was him, not me.
Oh. Well, it is wonderful. It's great to be able to recognize members of the public for the thing when they go above and beyond the call of duty, as well as our own members as well. We do have another presentation item, and that is Deputy Chief Shannon.
Thank you, President Wood, Board of Directors, Chief Harms, Brian Shannon, Deputy Chief of Support Services. If I can take just a couple of minutes before we get to the presentation. I was promoted a few months back to Deputy Chief of Support Services. One of my goals was, for my 5 divisions, I wanted to get a little more face time with my managers to come up here and speak in front of the board and really let them know what we do in support services. And I think that's kind of a first. I'm not sure that's really been done before. So tonight, I have the pleasure of bringing up George Graven. George Graven is our facilities manager. He's a 17-year veteran of our department. About a year ago, he got promoted to facilities manager, and he has taken off since then. Wonderful job. He's got a great crew. So I'm going to turn the floor over to him and let him give you a little overview of what the facilities division does here at Metro Fire. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Wood, board members, Chief Harms. I am your facilities manager, George Graven, and I'm here to present you with my facilities division overview and annual report. Tonight I'll present how we prioritize repairs, what our responsibilities include. I'll give an overview of the facilities division, facilities maintenance and work orders, how we plan projects and repairs, a look at some of last year's projects, and what's slated for our current budget year. Facilities' primary function is repairing and replacing critical firehouse components. We prioritize repairing these components by coordinating with station personnel in performing major and minor repairs. Sometimes repairs require collaboration between multiple support divisions as well as with station personnel. Facilities' secondary function is remodeling, improving, or replacing non-critical firehouse components. Projects like remodeling, painting, flooring, and landscape get deferred for items like air conditioning or electrical and plumbing repairs. Sometimes secondary function repairs are coordinated with help from station personnel, and at times, station crews take on entire projects like when the crews at Station 23 refurbished their dorm. Facilities strives to minimize the impact of our remodel project works on stations like when we assembled the portable kitchen to use during kitchen remodels. Here are some statistics for our fire stations and support properties. I was surprised in finding that our improved property is about 500,000 square feet and that 50% of our firehouses are 50 years old or older. Considering old firehouses with aged infrastructure, or any firehouse actually, when you have 3 shifts of firefighters cooking, cleaning, and using appliances, there is a lot to maintain and repair. Some firehouses have electrical systems that weren't originally supporting items like microwaves, ice machines, and exhaust extraction systems, so these stations are prone to needing a high level of electrical repairs. Also, some of our aged plumbing systems have failures like water lines leaking under slabs, cracked shower pans, or just aging fixtures that need to be upgraded and replaced. Even the physical size of our older firehouses is outdated because we've literally had to raise the height of apparatus bay doors in 2 stations in order to accommodate the additional height of newer fire apparatus. This facilities overview shows that our division interacts with many other support divisions and also shows some of the varying skills of our technicians and our assistant. Your facilities division consists of a manager, 2 technicians, with a third starting on Monday, 1 assistant, and a 50% shared office technician between fleet and facilities. And actually, referring to Amy with a term like 50% doesn't fit because she gives about 200% to keep both divisions running smoothly. Technician number 1, John, leads projects like kitchen and bathroom remodels and special projects like the installation of the Zinfandel back fence. I really appreciate John's persistence with the Zinfandel project as it took a lot of coordinating with outside agencies and scheduling construction around a burrowing owl's nesting season. Technician number 2 joined us in 2016 and has really helped with his good general skill set and his electrical expertise. Along with his other duties, Joe has been busy converting district lighting systems with LEDs for energy conservation. Technician number 3, Aldre, is joining our division next week as an HVAC specialist and is definitely more than welcome after this long, hot summer. Our facilities assistant, Jamie, helps our technicians with larger projects and is a painting and drywall specialist who also coordinates projects with station personnel. Facilities maintenance and inspection of firehouse components are performed by personnel and then submitted to the monthly maintenance form. These forms are emailed to both the facilities and the safety divisions. Some of the maintenance is seasonally targeted, like checking the station's irrigation and apparatus bay coolers in the spring, or cleaning roof gutters in the fall. This slide shows the checklist that personnel submit with some general items in large to illustrate the types of maintenance performed. Station personnel maintain components and correct as many defects as reasonable. If the issue cannot be resolved by station personnel, they mark the form accordingly and then submit a repair request in the form of an e-maintenance work order. The e-maintenance form is required before facilities will schedule any repairs. The exception is for critical firehouse components and busy station crews. When crews are too busy to enter the electronic form, they call us on our cell phones. Facilities reacts as quickly as possible in this situation, but we still require the eventual submission of the form. Once a form is electronically submitted, all facilities personnel are immediately emailed the copy of the request, so this form is the most efficient way to notify facilities personnel of issues as quickly as possible. This slide is a screenshot of some work orders we receive. Amy has expanded a few to show the differing types of requests we get. We use our work orders to assign repairs to technicians and our assistant, and to plan, fund, and schedule repairs that can become major projects. The e-maintenance program helps with tracking our own repairs as well as with vendor management. For instance, we get multiple overhead door requests per week, and some stations have multiple doors. We can go back to a closed work order to see what was previously repaired to determine if a warranty is due. This helps ensure that Metro Fire is getting what we pay for with vendor repairs. This slide illustrates the volume of e-maintenance work order requests we have received since the start of the program in 2014. Note that 2017 is projected based on a current monthly average request volume of about 100 per month. Also, spikes in requests occur during seasonal events like excessive rain or during a heat wave. This is the facility's 3-month job board, and it looks like a bit of a mess, but it does keep us on track with major projects or meetings. Most mornings, our facilities staff pores over work requests and the job board to determine who will do what for the day. This is where having facilities technicians and assistants with good general skills allows us to geographically focus resources to efficiently accomplish multiple repairs while in the same area. This slide represents some of the projects completed last budget cycle. We replaced several roofs following the 2013 district-wide roof survey and replacement plan, and several paving projects following the 2014 paving replacement program. Our 2 largest projects of the year was the roof replacement at 2101 Hurley Way and the Fleet asphalt replacement. Also, note that last year, Stations 42 water line repipe, where the water lines were routed overhead because of 2 incidents of under-slab water leaks, shower remodel at Station 54, structural beam repair at Station 63, all new station signs, and the installation of the Zinfandel back fence. This year, we have reevaluated the roof replacement plan because our extremely wet winter identified additional roof leak issues, so we focused our efforts on major roof repairs that we believe will also extend the life of roofs by about 5 years. Our asphalt and paving work continues. Also this year, we'll be replacing several HVAC systems, refurbishing a couple of bathrooms, painting the exterior of Station 61 and the fleet doors. We have a shower refurbishment at Station 65 and classroom refurbishments at Station 50 and Station 52. This concludes my Facilities Divisional Overview and Annual Report, and at this time I can take questions if you have any.
Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Graven? Very impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chief Shannon, thank you for the initiative. This is very informative, and I know we all appreciate it. Thank you. Moving on to the action items. Our first one is with Chief Harms.
Directors, the action item number 1 is the Memorandum of Understanding, or the MOU, by and between Sacramento Metro Fire District and the Sacramento Area Local 522. Over the past number of months, the negotiation team has been working to consolidate all of the tentative agreements, the TAs, letters of understandings, side letters, resolutions, breaking all into one complete memorandum of understanding. They began the work in February of 2017 and was able to put it all together. A big part of it was that there were 16 amendments from the previous MOUs that needed to be put together, and it spanned at a time from January 1st of 2007 through December 31st of 2015. Along with the staff working on it, they also had to work very closely with 522 and the attorneys to make sure that the language was correct as we went through and put all those side letters together. The latest tentative agreement was approved by a resolution number 2016-048 on May 12th of 2016 that brought everything together. The new MOU spans the terms of May 1st, 2016 through December 31st, 2018, and was signed on August 24th, 2017 by all the parties. Staff recommends that the board approves the resolution adopting in full the terms and conditions contained in the MOU.
Do we have any questions or comments for Chief Harms on this item? If we can, get a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the MOU between the Sacramento Area Firefighters Local 522 and Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District.
I second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the roll, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets. Aye. Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Chief, thank you so much for all your time and staff's time in putting this together, and 522 as well. We appreciate all the work they did to get this cleaned up and organized into one simple document. So thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have item number 2, Settlement Authority Limits and Guidelines with Chief Casantini. Good day.
Good evening, Director Wood, the Board of Directors, Fire Chief Harms, and staff. Greg Casantini, Deputy Chief of Administration. Tonight before you have an action item number 2. We have as a resolution. So in 2017, July, staff met with SDRMA, which is our insurance company which provides coverage on liability claims. From that meeting, Chief Harms tasked staff to develop a settlement authority document to allow the fire chief to effectively manage some of the claims received by the district. All claims, including Government 910, workers' compensation, and other claims for money and damages not subject to Government Claims Act, were considered while drafting this resolution, and I'd like to recognize Board Clerk Melissa Pania for doing all of this work. By adopting this resolution, the fire chief will have the authority to allow, compromise, negotiate, or settle claims not exceeding $35,000. This will alleviate the need for board approval. Some exceptions include claims or demands involving death of an employee, employment practices, any claim in excess of $35,000, and any claim at the direction of the board president be agendized. Claims will continue to be managed with the assistance of SDRMA and York Risk Services, and while consulting general counsel. The proposed resolution before you tonight has been reviewed by general counsel. Staff recommends the board approve a resolution granting authority to the fire chief with the outlying limits and guidelines. I'll take any questions.
Any questions or comments for Chief Casantini? Thank you.
Yes. These will still be detailed in consent items, correct?
Yes, I believe,
No?
John?
In the fact of a settlement happening,
Yeah.
those would not be if this resolution gives the fire chief your board delegating to the fire chief the decision to settle or compromise a claim, and once that happens, it's a done deal. There's no further action required by the board upon a settlement within these settlement authorities.
All right.
Is there an opportunity to get some report quarterly or annually as to what claims have been settled?
We can always prepare that so that there's the board has knowledge of what's happening within the district for the settlement of claims. That can certainly happen for pending claims or closed claims. Moreover, even if there's a claim that's pending that is contemplated to be settled under the authority limits of this resolution, the board can still meet in closed session on those pending claims to discuss whatever needs to be discussed in relation to that particular claim and whether it should be settled or not.
Thank you. Director Jones?
Yes, thank you. Two items. The first one, the previous limit was, did we not have a previous limit of about 30,000?
Well, to my knowledge, that everything was taken to the board for any settlements. And so what we decided after with SDRMA as a recommendation was to take a lot of the lower level settlements and have the fire chief the authority to settle those. So I do not believe that we've had anything not brought to the board.
Okay, so we're at 35, which, okay,
Correct.
that's within normal limits.
From what I understand, that is the standard. SDRMA actually has the same standard, or Workman's Comp has the same standard of $35,000.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much. And then the other item was if there is any question or issue, it can be brought up to the board president to be put before the board. So that always is an option before something occurs.
Yeah, that is correct.
So I think we have all these bases covered. Thanks, Chief.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you so much, Chief. Any other comments or questions on this? We can get a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, I move the motion that we adopt the settlement authority limits and guidelines.
I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale,
Yes.
Barnes,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Sheets, Clark,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much, Chief. Moving on, CFO Thomas, you get to bring us the fiscal year 2017-18 final budget.
Good evening, directors, Chief Harms. I actually think that I will turn it over to Chief Harms to say a few words at the beginning as I get my PowerPoint set up.
Amanda brings forward, or our CFO, Ms. Thomas brings forward our final budget. We've had our preliminary budget. There are just a few changes between the preliminary and the final budget. I'm just very happy with staff and the time that staff has put in to this budget. I think that it kind of is, it wasn't planned this way, but if you could just look at services and supplies had gone up, but if you look at the amount of work, and I saw Director Kelly taking a picture of the amount of fire stations and facilities, and when you put it on a paper, it kind of makes you really look at it and think, man, there is just a lot of places that are out there. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present the final budget.
Okay, thank you. Just by way of background, I think as you're all aware, we're right now operating under the preliminary budget for fiscal year 17-18. So the board adopted our preliminary budget in June so that we can start the year with a budget. But then what happens in the months between June and now is that we get better information. So most notably, we have better information about what our property tax revenues are going to be for fiscal year 17-18. And then we also know where we're estimating we ended the year for 16-17, so it's giving us a new starting position. So those are the two key pieces of information that we're able to incorporate into the final budget, but obviously there are other things that we've got more information in terms of what our expenditure needs are, and all of those things are then reflected in the final budget. The final budget was presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on August 24th. Since that time, there's been one relatively minor change, but otherwise what you'll see tonight is that same budget that was presented to the Finance Committee. And then I did want to just sort of give you guys some advance notice that we'll be talking at the end of this about our 5-year forecast, which was originally presented at the strategic planning workshop, and we've been able to make some adjustments to that based on new information as well. So those are the things that I'll be covering this evening. So looking at those final budget changes, as I said, in terms of background, the preliminary budget was adopted on June 8th of this year. At that time, we were looking at a $1.3 million deficit in the general fund. So that means a $1.3 million use of general fund reserves during fiscal year 17-18. Looking now at what we're recommending in terms of changes to the final budget relative to the preliminary budget, again, based on that better information that we have now, is we're looking at a revenue increase of about $1.9 million. And that is resulting primarily from revised property tax revenue estimates. So we think that property tax revenues in 17-18 are going to be about a 6% increase, whereas in the preliminary budget, we were estimating about a 5% increase. So we have some additional revenue that we're expecting to see this year. And we're also looking at expenditure increases of about $1.6 million relative to preliminary budget. And that's because we're able to now accommodate some of those needs and requests that were originally identified at preliminary budget, but that we didn't think we would have the funding to be able to accommodate. And then finally, we're ending up in a better starting position than we thought we were going to. So based on our preliminary unaudited results for 16-17, and I do want to stress that those numbers will change. We continue to accrue revenues actually through the end of this month, and there are other adjustments that will be made as a result of the audit process. But based on those preliminary unaudited numbers, we think that we ended 16-17 $3.3 million better off than we budgeted. So that's a $3.3 million improvement in our starting reserve balance in 17-18 compared to what we were estimating at preliminary budget. So as a result of all of those things, we're now projecting a reserve ratio at the end of 17-18 of 12.1% compared to the 10.4% that we were projecting at preliminary budget. So an improvement there. So I think you're probably familiar with this table. This is showing us the final budget for 17-18 for all of the district's major funds. I'm going to talk in more detail about the first 4 here. And most of the presentation will focus on the general fund. Just because I won't be talking about these funds later on, I will mention right now we have a development impact fees fund. We've talked about that funding source really being restricted in use to new fire stations and equipment for new fire stations, but you can see that we're expecting to get another $1.5 million in revenue this year for that funding, or excuse me, for that fund. We also have an IGT fund, so we talked about how that works and how we are expecting in 17-18 to actually have 2 years worth of IGT activity. So if you look at that revenues less expenditure line, which is kind of in the middle of the table there in the IGT fund column, you can see that we're expecting net IGT revenue of about $11.5 million. Roughly half of that, or about $6 million, is going to be transferred to the general fund in 17-18, and then there would be another $5.7 million that would remain in that fund and would be available for 18-19 transfer and supporting of general fund expenses in 18-19. So that's really not changed from preliminary budget either. So when we look at the funding that is available in the general fund in 17-18, it's really the combination of the about $191 million in general fund revenue and that $6 million you can see down below there in that column that's coming in from the IGT fund. So it's those two together that make up the general fund funding. When you compare that to our anticipated expenses in the general fund and the transfers that need to come out of the general fund to the capital facilities fund and the lease properties fund, we're looking at about a $1 million total use of general fund reserves. So our use is more than our revenues by about $1 million. We're starting in the general fund at about $24.8 million. So taking out that $1 million, we're ending at roughly $23.7 million. So that's our projected reserve at the end of the year that translates into that 12.1% reserve ratio. So looking a little bit more closely at the general fund and kind of the year-to-year changes that we're expecting, if you look at that first line, revenues, you can see looking in the shaded pink column there, our preliminary results for 16-17. So our estimated actual revenues were about $183 million. And then looking over to the blue column, our final budget number for 17-18 is about $191 million. So comparing those 2 years is what we're showing in the variance column. So about a $7.3 million year-to-year increase in general fund revenues. Looking at the total expenditures line, you can see in that variance column, there's about an $11.4 million year-to-year increase in total expenditures. And I'll talk to you about the detail behind that in the next few slides. Looking at the total transfers, so that's the transfer that's coming in from the IGT fund and subtracting out the money that's going out to the capital facilities fund, the lease properties fund, and to a much smaller extent, the grants fund. You can see, looking at just that variance column, we have about a $500,000 improvement there. So looking toward the bottom line, that's where we have, if you look in the blue column, where you're comparing all of the revenue sources minus the expenditures and then netting the transfers, we have that about approximately $1 million use of reserves that we're showing in 17-18. This chart you've also seen before. So this is a history of general fund revenues. This chart's been adjusted to include that net IGT revenue. So although that's not strictly a general fund revenue, in some years it was accounted for in the general fund. So just to have a kind of consistent historical picture, we're including the net amount in the years in which we received that funding source. I mean, I think what this chart helps put in perspective is that if you look at the recent economic recession, you can see that in terms of our property tax revenue, which is that dark blue portion, it really, obviously we started seeing the decline in 2008-9, and we did not recover to that pre-recession level until 2016-17. No, so really not until last year did we get up to that same level of property tax revenues. The good thing that happened is if you look at the total revenue, so the difference between property tax revenues and total revenues being those other revenue sources shown in the light blue, that from a total revenue standpoint, we had recovered to our pre-recession level by fiscal year 13-14. And really what is contributing to that are the medic cost recovery revenues, as well as those supplemental programs that we're participating in, the GEMT and IGT, really helped to recover to that total revenue number sooner than we would have if we were relying solely upon property tax revenues. So that if you look in 2007-8, property taxes represented about 80% of general fund revenues, and now in 17-18, they're closer to 70%. So this pie chart is showing us just for those general fund revenues, so excluding the IGT now, kind of what makes up those revenues. So of that somewhat smaller number, property taxes are about 73% of the total, but you can see our medic cost recovery, and here this is including GEMT, is just under 20% of revenues. And then we have smaller amounts coming from some of the other revenue categories. To talk a little bit more about what's going on with revenues, as we saw, we're projecting general fund revenues of about $191 million Again, overall, that's about a $7.3 million increase compared to last year. That's really resulting from a $7.8 million projected increase in property tax revenues. We also have a $3.2 million projected increase in medic cost recovery, and that's resulting from estimating that we're going to be billing for more transports, as well as the fact that we've adjusted now our fees to actually recover costs. So those two things are contributing to higher revenues being expected in 17-18. And then we have this adjustment factor that needs to take place, because when we're comparing to 16-17, we're comparing to a year that includes deployment expenses and reimbursements. And when we're looking at our final budget for 17-18, we're not yet factoring in those numbers. Those get added in at mid-year when we know what the actual numbers are. So the 17-18 revenue numbers are $3.8 million lower than 16-17, just as a result of the fact that we're not including those deployment reimbursements. So when we adjust for all that to do an apples-to-apples comparison, it's at about an $11.1 million increase year to year in revenues. And then, as I mentioned, we have that net IGT revenue transferred into the general fund of about $6 million. So that gets added to the $191 million. And it's about a $100,000 increase for that IGT portion compared to last year. Turning to look at our expenses in the general fund, I think you're familiar with this pie chart as well. So about 85% of our general fund expenses are labor, about 13% services and supplies, and then the remaining less than 2% are assessments and debt service. So looking at labor costs, we have a $164 million labor budget, which is a $7.3 million increase compared to last year. When we do that same adjustment on the expense side that we just did on the revenue side for deployment expenses, the net increase year to year is about $10.3 million, or about 6.7%. And some of the reasons for that, so the changes 17-18 versus 16-17, we have scheduled salary increases under the MOU. We have increased payments related to unfunded pension liability that we've talked about. And then also just due to the timing of the cashing out of holiday, we have an increase in holiday pay in 17-18 versus 16-17. Also, for our 17-18 budget, we assume that all of our budgeted positions are filled. That's the assumption that we make. So we have increased salaries and benefits costs relative to 16-17 because we're assuming no vacancies, whereas obviously there were vacancies in 16-17. So there's an increase there that gets offset, which I'll talk about in just a second. But we also have some new positions that were added at preliminary budget that are adding a small amount of cost. One of those is as you heard George talk about, new facilities technician. We also have a couple of new inspectors that will result in additional cost recovery as those inspections are performed. And then, as I mentioned, the fact that we're assuming all of our positions are filled means that we're assuming that we'll have lower overtime in 17-18 versus 16-17. So it actually works out to be about a 27% reduction in overtime as a result of assuming that there are filled positions. What I do want to point out is that experience has shown that if those assumptions don't hold true, the positions aren't filled, really the things balance each other out. So then we have a savings in salaries and benefits that's offset by higher than expected overtime, but we're kind of able to manage that and balance it as we move through the year. So looking at just our other expenses in the general fund and then that transfer activity that's impacting the bottom line, services and supplies, total budget of $26 million. That's about a $4 million increase compared to last year. The largest thing contributing to that is almost $1 million resulting from assuming 12 months of contract ambulance service, whereas there was only 7 months in 16-17, so those additional months are resulting in additional cost. And then really it's sort of a combination of factors. We have increases for training, building services. Again, you heard George talk about the roof repairs, asphalt, those kinds of things. Fuel, safety clothing and supplies. So if we assume we're filling positions, we're buying safety clothing and supplies for those positions. We also have replacement needs that are being met. And then we also have enterprise resource planning system, replacement system procurement and implementation that's being reflected in 17-18. We also have debt service assessments and contributions in the general fund of about $3 million. And then, as I said, we have that net transfer activity, which is really adding $1.5 million in net funding to the general fund. So we have $3.9 million that needs to go out to the capital facilities fund, about $600,000 to the leased properties fund, and then we have $6 million coming in from the IGT fund. So those are all the activities that are happening in 17-18 that are resulting in that net $1 million use of reserves. Turning to look at the capital facilities fund and what is resulting in that required transfer from the general fund. I think I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail on the next slide, but just to point out to you what's happening here on this table, I think the important thing to look at is actually that capital outlay line, which is right above the total expenditures line near the middle of the table. And what capital outlay means is that's what are we buying? So what are the capital equipment purchases that are being made? And you can see that we have budgeted in 16-17, which is that first column there, mid-year budget. We have budgeted for $8.9 million in capital purchases. We actually were only able to get about $7.1 million of that completed for 16-17. So you can see that in 17-18, we had originally in preliminary budgeted $4.2 million, and now in final budget we're showing $6.2 million, and that's really a lot of that resulting from those things that weren't purchased in 16-17 being rebudgeted to 17-18. So that's probably explains a lot of the change that's happening from preliminary to final. And then if you look, so here just kind of explaining where that $3.9 million need from the general fund is coming from. So we have that $6.2 million in capital outlay that I just talked about. $3.8 million of that will be financed. So we'll get $3.9 million in financing proceeds to offset that cost. We also have $1.9 million that's already in the capital facilities fund because we funded that last year, but we didn't make those purchases last year. So those two funding sources are available to offset that capital outlay need, reducing the amount that needs to come from the general fund this year. But then on top of the $6.2 million in purchases, we have $4.2 million in debt service. Most of that resulting from purchases that were made and financed in previous years, but about $400,000 of that $4.2 million is related to the $3.8 million that we're financing in 17-18. So it's those two together, the capital purchases and the debt service, offset by the other funding sources that result in that $3.9 million that comes from the general fund. And just listed here for you are some of the major purchases that are contributing to that $6.2 million total. So we have completion of the station alerting project that was started last year, purchase of a hazmat truck, purchase of 3 ambulances, 3 Type 6 engines, and an air rig. Turning to look at the grant fund, the grant fund budget includes the 3 active grants totaling about $1.5 million in grant revenue and expenditures. The largest of those is the SAFER grant that we have, and that is funding about $1.2 million for 9 firefighter positions. I do want to mention, I'll talk about it again in a few slides, that grant does expire in August of 2018. So that's $1.2 million in annual funding that would no longer be coming from this grant at that point. And then the remaining $300,000 of grant revenue is basically split between the other 2 grants, one for the certification of the Zinfandel site and the other for the advanced bulk storage training. The last fund we'll look at this evening is the leased properties fund. As you know, this is where we account for the revenue and expenses associated with the district's leased property. And really the key assumption for this fund for this year relates to the leasing of the first floor of this building, which is expected to happen within the next few months and is expected to result in significant one-time cost associated with the tenant improvements that would need to happen. So if you look under expenditures, you'll see for total expenditures in 17-18, we're showing about $2.3 million in expense, and that's resulting primarily from those one-time expenses. We are able to offset the expenditures with anticipated revenue as well as fund balance that's already in the leased properties fund, but we do need about a $600,000 transfer to come in from the general fund, again, on this sort of one-time basis for the upfront costs that will be then recovered over the life of the lease. But I think it is worth pointing out that when we talk about a $1 million use of reserves this year, over half of that is really resulting from this one-time expense. So just to sort of summarize, we are projecting reserves at the end of 17-18 of $23.7 million, which, as I said, is 12.1% of net budgeted expenditures. And you know, as I talked about at the beginning, we also should be looking beyond 17-18 and kind of what the next 5 years show. We did talk about that at the strategic planning workshop, and you know, I think since then some developments have occurred that are encouraging. So we now have a higher property tax revenue estimate for this year, right? So that's resulting in a higher base that we're starting from in terms of assuming future increases. We also know that we ended 16-17 in a better position than we thought we were going to. So that's a higher starting position for our reserve balance. So those things are positive. I think we continue to sort of have the same challenges that were identified, but there's a bit of good news, at least regarding the first of those as well. So we do expect our pension costs to increase, and for those increases to be significant as a result of additional contributions that will be required on the unfunded liability. However, we have some new information from CalPERS that's indicating that those increases may not be or will not be as high as we were originally expecting them to be. So that is improving the picture a bit. So I think continues to be a challenge, but you know, a little bit of good news in terms of our ability to address that challenge. We also, you know, continue to have significant capital replacement and maintenance needs into the future. So we have an SCBA replacement that's roughly, you know, we're thinking $5 million that will need to be funded. Again, you heard George talk about, you know, what our facilities repair and replacement needs will be. We know that we have vehicle replacement needs and other equipment. So that's something that we're factoring in terms of what those expenses really are, so that we can have a realistic idea of what it's going to take to address those. And then I mentioned to you the expiration of the SAFER grant in 18-19. So that's essentially $1.2 million of funding that at this point we need to assume wouldn't be there. And what would it look like if it wasn't? And then finally, the future of the IGT program continues to be uncertain. So that's $6 million a year that we don't have any definitive information won't be there, but we do know that there's significant risk that it either could be eliminated or substantially reduced. So that's something that we just need to keep our eyes on. I'm kind of looking at what the numbers look like at this point. So you can see that we are projecting our revenues, the red bar here being revenues, to increase into the future. And that's primarily driven by an assumption of about 4% annual growth in property tax revenues. So 6% this year, but 4% thereafter. And then when we compare those revenue projections to what we're projecting for expenses, shown here in the blue bars, you can see that really over this next 3 to 4 year period, really most significantly in the next 3 years, we are still showing expense projections outpacing revenue projections. And what that means, you know, if those revenues were to, or if those estimates were to be borne out, what that would mean would be a use of reserves in those years, which would be depleting the reserve balance. So kind of what that looks like in terms of the reserve picture is this. So you can see 17-18, we're at that approximately $24 million ending number, but that in the next 3 years really does get brought down significantly to about $11 million in 2021-22 as a result of those revenue and expense projections. When we look at that as a percentage of budget, so that reserve ratio, you can see that would take us down to about the 5% mark, which is obviously well below the 15% target that's been established. So, I mean, this is really something that we're just going to continue to use as a tool in decision making as we move through budget processes. What I want to emphasize the most is that it is something that gets refined as we get better information, right? We have more certainty about what will happen with our revenue sources or what our needs will be. And I don't want to portray this as this is what will happen. It's more this is what is likely to happen based on the information that we know today, and will inform things that we need to make decisions about that can impact this positively or negatively. So with that, the recommendation is to adopt the final budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2018, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Ms. Thomas, thank you so much. Very informative. Do we have any questions for Ms. Thomas? Director Jones.
Yes, thank you. On the last, second last slide that you put up there for the projection, a 5-year projection for use of reserves, did that include IGT or not?
So this assumes that IGT would continue as it is.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's one of the assumptions for these
Right.
5-year projections.
So,
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
So if that $6 million a year wasn't there, you can see that this picture would not look as positive as it does.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Director Gale.
I think one important one is our increased in funding for the pension liability, underfunded, and as a matter of fact, it'll give us great press addressing that in the past. Those have been one of the big problems for most organizations, underfunding of them, and we are addressing that.
Right. So these figures are showing that we would fund all of the contributions that CalPERS is currently projecting that we would need to fund over the next 5 years. Yes.
Fantastic.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Thomas? Yes, Director Jones. Barnes, excuse me.
Thank you. No, it's all right, Mr. Chair. No, just thank you. I'm glad we have you and your team on our side when you run these numbers and you look at how we're projecting. It's comforting to know that we're not guaranteeing those grant monies are going to be there in the future. I know a lot of public agencies, base everything off of grant funding and pray that it's going to be there in the future. When it runs out, things get really bad. So it's comforting to see that. The projections don't look good, but as we know, those final numbers come back. I don't say they don't look good, but they look challenging, I would say, in the future. But as we look 5 years down the road, again, a credit to you, your staff, to project that, to prepare us for that rainy day fund if we need it and make sure it's there when we do need it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Thomas? Thank you so much. As a reminder to my fellow directors, we have before us 7 different resolutions. Each one needs to be taken individually, so I'll need a motion for each, a second for each, and we'll vote on each individually. So can I get a motion for Resolution A?
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution A, 2017-2018 final budget for the General Operating Fund 212A.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for item 3A. Can we get a vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Can we get a resolution or a motion for item 3B, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution B, 2017-2018 final budget for the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can we get a motion for item number 3C, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution C, the 2017-2018 final budget for the Grants Fund 212G.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Can we get a motion and a second for item 3D, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution D, the 2017-2018 final budget for the Development Impact Fees Fund 212I.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can we get a motion and a second for item 3E, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move Resolution E, the 2017-2018 final budget for the Leased Properties Fund 212L.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Can we get a motion and a second for item 3F, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move item 3F, the resolution for the 2017-2018 final budget for the IGT Fund 212M.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And finally, can we get a motion and a second for item 3G, please?
Mr. Chairman, I would move item 3G, staff reports and resolutions amending the fiscal year 2016-2017 and adopting the fiscal year 2017-2018 appropriation limits.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Can we get the vote, please?
Director Gale.
Yes.
Barnes.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Clark.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
And Wood.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas, thank you so much to you and your staff for all the work you did in getting this final budget to us timely. And Chief Casantini, thank you as well. I see her pointing at you, so thank you. Moving on to reports, President's Report. Several years ago, the district created a recognition for leadership. It's called the District Leadership Legacy Recognition Award. We have a nomination, and so pursuant to policy, I have asked 3 directors to sit on a committee to consider that nomination. Those directors are Directors Clark, Jones, and Kelly. I thank you for your volunteering for that, and we will be coming back to the board at some point down the road after consideration of that nomination. Moving on to the Chief's report, Chief Harms.
Thank you. It's been, I think, 3 weeks since we were together. We have some congratulations for some newly promoted individuals. We have Fire Inspector Janie Callison, who was promoted to Fire Inspector 2. We had some single role paramedics that were promoted. We had Gary Thavasai, Brayton Vanny, and Kevin Stewart that was promoted from EMT to paramedic. And so we saw them the other day. Congratulations to them. On August 28th, Engineer Scott Snyder retired from the district. Recruitments that we have out there right now are for the fire mechanic. We have an open position for them, and we also have a recruitment going on for some reserve firefighters that are happening. We had a number of meetings that we had over the past few weeks. One of the ongoing meetings that ended up being very timely was with us and the city. The exec staffs from both of us get together and meet, and it just happened to be in the middle of all the deployment of everybody leaving for the hurricanes. And during that time, a lot of information on standing up water assets to go down there. Our members were part of a team that went down and spent about 14 days in the Houston area, and then we're able to get back. But the switch was turned on to deploy and off to deploy a number of times of other things, and there's just a lot of information. So our normal meeting of sitting down and talked was just basically on hurricane stuff and what was happening, and then the hurricane to Florida followed right up behind, so we were good on that. We did on August 31st, Ty Bailey and I facilitated a meeting that was called EMS 2020. And what we did is we asked the folks from the city, Metro, Folsom, Consumnes, and then the dispatch center and the medical director, and we spent the day together. And we went through, and Ty and I facilitated, and we really talked about how much we are connected, and then somewhat of what different silos we have in that EMS service delivery. We talked a lot about what are the strengths of our system, what are the challenges that we have, and then as a group, what are those things that we want to focus on as we move forward. There was a number of areas, there were about 5 areas that came out. One of the biggest one was to look at the deployment model. And by saying that is the use of medics, when medics are dispatched on calls, sending medics on every call, some of the things and some of the processes that are done at the dispatch center. We talked about with the IFF's help, doing a regional feasibility study where they come in and look at the coverage that we have, a strategic plan for the system, some political and educational areas that we wanted to hit on, and then talked about the culture of the area fire service and what that culture is as we move forward. We'll produce a document from there and take that information and put it together. We'll work with the County Chiefs Association and then work with labor together to be able to put a plan together that everybody has input on and kind of sets the roadmap for us for moving forward. Ty and I weren't real sure how it was going to go. We weren't sure if we were going to show up at 9 and be out of there by 11. I was very happy that on both sides of labor and management, everybody was very open and talking, and we had do's and don'ts, and by about 4 o'clock we had to be able to wrap things up, and we really spent the day together, and I think it was very good across the region for us all to be in the same room together like that. I saw a few people out at the Capitol Air Show this past weekend. That was a lot of fun to be out there for myself. The first one, my wife and I were out there, and it was just a great event. I saw a number of you that were out there. There was a 9/11 run on September 10th that happened, and then myself and a number of members from Metro did the stair climb of 110 stories. You do 4 times up and down, and 3 times was probably pretty good for me, and that 4th time pretty much did me in on the last portions, but we all made it up to the top of the building there. So it was a great memorial and a great way not to forget the 9/11 and the 343 firefighters that were killed that day. Myself and Chris Vestal and Chief Johnson went over this week and was at Supervisor Susan Peters' community meeting, and she asked us to come in and speak, and spent quite a bit of time over there. Also met this week with Phil Cerna and just talked about issues in the county and some of the some opportunities that we have that are coming up in the future here. In 2 weeks, myself and Chief Shannon will be at the California Metro Fire Chiefs and the Cal Fire Chiefs Conference, and Chief Casantini will be in charge. That ends my report unless you have some questions.
Do we have any questions or comments for Chief Harms? Thank you so much, Chief. Moving on to the operations report, Assistant Chief Hine. Welcome.
And good evening, Board President, Directors, Chief Harms, Randall Hine, Assistant Chief. I'll be delivering the operations report this evening. Since the last report, the district has responded to 665 incidents that encompassed structure fires, vegetation fires, water rescues, and of course EMS responses. Currently, we have 3 incidents that we have members deployed on the Pierre, Orleans, and Helena incidents, and for a total personnel deployment of 19. Again, as Chief Harms mentioned, the individuals, 4 members that we had in Hurricane Harvey returned on September 8th. And another item that I wanted to cover with you as well was the Urban Shield event that took place on September 8th. And just give me a moment, I have a picture here to share with you. Is it coming? Okay, thank you. What the Urban Shield incident is that the Alameda County Sheriff's Department hosted the 11th Urban Shield meeting. That this readiness event basically took place at the Alameda County Fairgrounds and is one of the largest training exercises for both firefighters, police, and EMS workers around the country. And it's designed to prepare local government agencies for natural disasters and terror attacks. This year's Gray Command exercise tested the public safety personnel on how to respond to a major earthquake in an urban area. And Metro Fire, our heavy rescue 21 on B shift participated, and they teamed up with a heavy rescue team from CAL FIRE from the Napa County unit, and they participated in the USAR exercise, which consisted of 4 events: building collapse and victim removal, a heavy vehicle stabilization, high-angle rope rescue, and large animal rescue. And we're proud to announce that they took first place in this event.
Excellent.
An update on the Single Roll Academy. The Single Roll Academy began this week on 9/11 with 7 paramedics, 5 EMTs, and they will graduate and be completed on October 20th with their training. Brief update on wall times. They are below 30 minutes for our medic units, which is very positive within the district for the months of July and August, and currently are trending well for the month of September so far. But again, we're not in flu season, but these numbers are very positive for us. I'd like to report a field save. On September 4th, Engine 103 and Medic 102 on B shift responded to a 50-year-old male that was found unresponsive by the family. Bystander CPR was initiated by the family. Our crews arrived to find him in a shockable rhythm, provided cardiac medications, transporting him to an area hospital, and upon arrival was awake and alert. The crew that participated in that event were Captain Matt Stewart, it was Bo Levesque was the engineer, fire paramedic Brandon Richardson, paramedic Ryan Ramos, and paramedic Brayton Vanny. So we're very proud of these members, and of course in this case they were able to apply the training experience with a positive outcome. And this crew will be formally recognized at a later district event. At this point, I'd like to call up Captain Chris Vestal to cover an item for the Academy burn that took place today.
Good evening, President, Directors, Chief Harms. So this morning, I had the opportunity to go out to the Academy, and it was initially to get a news story out about them and the good work that our Academy is doing. And once we got out there, really good news crew that really wanted to be involved, and so we actually started setting it up yesterday. And we got them fit tested with gear, face masks, PPE, the full gamut. And what really happened with it was when they started buying off, they wanted to go live. So they went live from inside one of our live fire props. Some great video. I just posted on Facebook a few minutes ago back here. And I'm also going to show you a video here, which is a little bit longer than what they'll show on the newscast, because there's some really cool stuff that happened. But the video that I have really takes them through the beginning of the day in the Academy with lineup, to the classroom portion, where they learned about some fire behavior basics, through an SCBA confidence course and some firefighter rescue and search methods, to what we call the dollhouse, but that's really about fire flow path and some of the modern fireground dynamics that we're really having to pay attention to with the changes of building construction and materials and contents as well. So the final prop where they do the live fire is actually, it's a flashover prop. And the goal is for the recruits to be able to look at that and recognize when a building might flash over, which of course we know in the past we had Captain Brian Swindler, who was caught in a flashover, fortunately made it out, but his gear is actually set in that classroom. And both in this video and as well as the newscast, I believe they show that. So I'll get the video going, but it was a really good day. And I think we're getting a lot of good exposure out of it, and I think the news crew really had a lot of fun. Get the audio for you.
I sound like Vader, and I don't have to tell you what the recruits are going through, because we're in it with the recruits right now. They're actually lighting it up. This is the very first time that these recruits with the Sacramento Metro Fire Academy are going to be experiencing a flashover fire. It's going to get really hot in here, folks, anywhere from 300 to 500 degrees. Flashover fires are extremely dangerous. They can get up to 1,000 degrees, and right now we're listening to our instructor who's giving us some instruction, which I probably should be listening to. But basically, what you're looking at is that flame is going to go all the way above us. That's why we have to stay low on the ground. We have all of the proper gear, so they're making sure that we're all safe and in a controlled fire burn ring situation. So we're being as safe as we possibly can. So basically what we're wearing right now is we have our structure gear on. Fireproof pants, gloves, jackets, helmet, and we actually have, that's why I sound like Vader, that's helping us breathe right now because it's going to fill with smoke. They're going to close these doors, and they're basically instructing us how we're going to be moving. We have to stay low and we have to crawl. So basically, the closer we get to that fire, it hasn't even gotten super hot yet, it's going to get, the closer you are up here, the warmer it gets. I think that's what they're about to, they're going to, right, basically what our instructor is doing right now is telling them how they handle these flash-over situations. And unfortunately, while we're live, you're not going to see it get super, super hot yet because it hasn't gotten to that 300, 500 degrees yet. But make sure you tune in tonight because we'll have the full story of how this whole experience really is. Back to you guys.
And this is the part where it really simulates the flashover conditions. Where they're sitting is about 3 feet below the floor level, and what you're looking at is smoke that's banking down to what would be the floor level. And that flame is all that smoke spontaneously igniting, which is the definition of flashover, when all building contents reach their ignition point. And now you have just complete darkness from the smoke conditions.
Just tell me when.
One second here.
From 300 to 500 degrees, and the visibility is incredibly low.
Experience. That was the first time, being, feeling that heat, being in, seeing a flashover. What was it like? What was going through your mind?
It was a great experience. It was very nice to finally take everything from the classroom and actually apply it. We've had about 6 weeks of being in the class, learning about these different conditions and everything, and finally being able to apply it gives you a whole new perspective.
Let's be honest, how nervous were you?
I was a little nervous. For me, don't have prior fire experience, so you're a little nervous sitting there, but you're all right with the guys that are working with you.
When you go through that for the first time, there's a lot of pressure on the recruits because they want to make sure, we want to see who's gonna be able to handle it. Am I gonna be the one that has to leave the burn room? Talk about that. What's that pressure like?
Yeah, that pressure definitely exists day in and day out through workouts, through everything, which kind of prepares you for once you're in the field, you're gonna have those same sort of pressures. So it's just kind of dealing with them and overcoming them.
And that's Captain Swindler, at the time firefighter Swindler's gear. And you can see how it was burned through, almost completely ignited. A couple of things in there. I want to thank the Academy staff and the fire behavior cadre. Both of those crews were extremely accommodating, as well as the recruits. They operated as though we weren't even there, and as well as the news crew. They gave us all of their footage from this, and I also got some information from them with doing some future filming with some of our equipment that I didn't know how to do before. So hopefully that can increase our ability to get some better footage and produce some better videos in-house. But thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Captain. Any questions for Captain Vestal? Wonderful work. Thank you so much. Moving on, Local 522. Good evening, John.
Chair Wood, Board of Directors, Chief Harms, staff.
John Barsdale, Local 522 Director. I really don't have anything to report out other than it's been good that the local area-wide's been meeting with management. I was also at the 2020 EMS meeting, and it went really well. I look forward to having more meetings so we can kind of move in the same direction as a region and get the staffing in the in EMS and the medics that we need for the region. And that's all I have tonight. If there's any questions.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Barsdale? No. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on now to committee and delegate reports. Executive Committee has not met, and there's no current plans to meet. Communication Center JPA, Assistant Chief Johnson.
Good evening, Directors, Chief Harms. The Comm Center JPA met last on August 29th. Several items were brought before the board, new projects, and the board decided to push some of those off or back until the new CAD implementation is complete, allowing staff to have some additional time. The September meeting has been canceled, and a special meeting has been scheduled for October 3rd right here in this chambers at 9 a.m.
Thank you so much. Any comments or questions for Chief Johnson? Thank you. Moving on to the California Fire and Rescue Training JPA, Director Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since I last reported out, the JPA has not met. We will be meeting a week from today, 4 p.m. in the California Exercise Simulation Center.
Thank you so much. Moving on to the Finance and Audit Committee. Back to you, Director Kelly.
Finance and Audit Committee reported out last meeting. This evening you heard the final budget for 2017-2018, and we will not have a Finance Committee this month due to the fact that, well, the budget's just been passed, and next month we have a meeting that's off-site, so we will probably meet next in October.
Thank you, Director. The Policy Committee met tonight, and Director Clark?
Yes.
Would you report out on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the Policy Committee met, and we had an action item regarding the pension funding bonds early payoff policy. And we've referred it to the board.
Thank you very much.
And the next meeting will be to be determined.
Thank you very much. Before we get to board member questions and comments, when we go into closed session, and when we come back from closed session, I'm hoping that we come back to an empty room. I just want to make sure that you are all aware before you leave that our next meeting is going to be at Station 29. That'll be on September 28th. That's at 8681 Greenback Lane. Thank you in advance to all of those, including Melissa Pania, who are making that happen. So we look forward to seeing you all there on September 28th, and not here when we come back from closed session. We'll start with board member questions and comments. I'll start to my far right with Director Gale.
The tide will be awesome this year.
Director Gould?
No comment.
Moving over to the left, Director Kelly.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I was feeling terrible this weekend, down with the late summer cold, I guess it was, but I missed being out at the air show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Director. Director Clark?
Yes, I also missed being out at the air show. I was so looking forward to it, but I had to work on Saturday, so I look forward to next year.
Thank you, Director. Director Sheets?
No comment.
Director Jones?
I'll make this quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make this quick, but I feel like I very much definitely want to acknowledge Daniel Harvey, our award recipient, civilian award tonight. I'd like to thank George Gravin, the facilities manager, especially the graphs and discussion on the perspective of age of our facilities, so that anyone doubts need for budget scrutiny, justification is totally there. And finally, there's a certain reassurance with the 12% reserve number. It's a good direction, and we'll just do our best to try to stay up there. Thank you for the projections.
Thank you, Director. Director Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. I was at the air show, but we're in a working capacity, but it was great working next to Metro Fire. It's nice when the air show crew comes in and the pilots, and they talk about safety checks and how they take it serious that the fire crews get with the pilots to find out their extraction plans. Each plane is different, as you know, so the different extraction plan, but watch everybody take it so seriously. I always say when it's game day, we want to make sure it never happens, because when you hear someone say it never happens, it freaks me out, all right, because you never know that's when it's going to happen. But first-class organization, Metro Fire did it again. They showed up, made sure everybody was taken care of. It was hot Saturday and Sunday, so there were some people that I don't think hydrated appropriately, but it was great to have everybody working together. One thing, October 7th, if we can put it on the calendars, is the Guns N' Hoses baseball game. It'll be at Sacramento State University at 4 p.m. We're having a home run derby for the first hour, then the actual game. So we're trying to make it later in the season, try and get past all the Pop Warner football games so we can get hopefully maximum attendance. And the monies raised from that game will also go to the Firefighter Burn Institute. So we will get flyers out to the organization and everybody, and just put that on your calendars.
Thank you, Director Barnes. I don't have anything in addition to add, other than do want to thank the chief again and staff for bringing Mr. Harvey's story to us, and look forward to many more of those throughout the coming years. And Chief Shannon, thank you for your foresight in getting Mr. Graven up here. It was interesting, as Director Jones pointed out, the timing was great to see the needs at the same time we had the final budget. So thank you so much for that. Director Barnes, just ask, you have one more comment?
I do. Thank you for allowing me to do this. When I came here tonight, Director Wood came to me and said, hey, I'd like to say something on behalf of Deputy Bob French. I will get through this, I guarantee it. But what I saw here tonight when we talk about the news media coverage, there's going to be some parallels of what both organizations do in a firefighter setting and a law enforcement setting, setting as well as the EMS. We're a humble profession in public safety. We don't like to brag about what we do, but by getting the media out there and getting people to see what people go through, how to train for these emergencies and fires and active shooter situations. But what happened, I just want to give a little background on Deputy French. I knew him well. A lot of us did. He was a larger-than-life personality, which makes it tough. All of them are tough, but he was no stranger to anyone, and if you walked in the room and didn't know him, about 5 minutes into it, you would. As I coined him one day, I said he's a trainee's best mentor, a partner's safety net, a supervisor's nightmare, but a commander's VIP. I mean, he was that employee. And to hear what he went through that day, and everybody went through when I call him the boogeyman. He was out that day. And Bob was mortally hit, but yet he still engaged that suspect as he was still mortally hit. We trained for it in the fire academies and the police academies that this is what we do. But what also impacted were the fire crews that showed up to provide life-saving measures for Bob. He was talking as he left and ultimately succumbed to his injuries. And they made it tough for everybody. And what I said to the command staff out of our North Division was, please reach out to those fire crews, because they did everything they could to save him, and they know they're going to be taking this home also, in which they did, which I think builds that relationship with both professions. But tonight I just wanted to tell you a little bit about him. There's so much more about him. If you knew him, you knew a lot about him, because he wasn't shy by any means. But both organizations and fire and everybody came to help, and that was greatly it was greatly needed that day, not only for the community, but on the 7th when the funeral happened. I was driving up to the church, and it was well before everything was starting, and I remember seeing a Metro fire truck over one of the overpassings, and I knew what they were doing. They were getting set up for the procession. Saw Captain Item up on top walking around, and once I saw a familiar face, I lost it all the way to the church. But I want people to know, not only in this room, not only in the profession of public safety, but hopefully the citizens understand that when both agencies come together for a major event like this, at some point they have to take their uniforms off, fill up their gas tanks, go home, have dinner with their families, and pretend something like this never happened. And it did that day. But the true heroes responded, true heroes prevailed, and they will always do that. So thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director. And we will close the meeting with a moment of silence for Deputy French. We will close the meeting with a moment of silence for Deputy French. In the meantime, we're going to be going into closed session. I'll remind all of you we will be next at Station 29, 8681 Greenback in Orangevale on September 28th at 6 o'clock. I look forward to seeing you there. I look forward to not seeing you when we come back from closed session. So thank you.
There's a Director Gale.
Oh.
Did I not, Mr. Chair, did I not hear you say that you didn't want to see anybody in the audience at the end of the meeting?
They were in closed session with us.
I know, but didn't you still say that? That when we came out, you would be gone? What's wrong with you three? Yeah, yeah, because you don't cast a shadow.
Start walking off those
They want to hear me report out.
Oh, yeah,
And
right.
I wasn't going to forget this time.
Sign autographs.
I have it written down right here. All right, welcome back. Council, would you report out, please?
Thank you. The board met in closed session concerning the workers' compensation claim of Donald Carroll. The board voted to approve settlement of that workers' compensation claim. The board also met in closed session to consider the Government Code Section 910 claim of Kenneth Danduran and Holly Danduran. The board voted to reject that claim under Section 910 and refer the matter to its insurance pool. The board also met in conference with counsel for pending litigation in the Vukasinovich case and the Griffin case, and the board took no action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council. One last time, our next meeting will be September 28th at 6 o'clock at Station 29, 8681 Greenback Lane. Look forward to seeing everyone there. Until then, we are adjourned.
Moment of silence.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We're going to adjourn with a moment of silence. I couldn't read your lips. I'm sorry, Melissa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No.